When my stepmother Cathy asked to borrow my debit card for emergency groceries at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night, I didn't think twice about handing it over. After all, she'd raised me since I was 12, and family helps family, right? But when I woke up the next morning to 17 bank notifications and a balance that had plummeted from $8,900 to $500, I knew something was terribly wrong. The real shock came when I opened Instagram and saw my stepsister Harper's story, designer bags, expensive jewelry and a luxury spa day, all posted with timestamps that matched my bank withdrawals exactly. What I thought was a simple grocery run had turned into an $8,400 shopping spree, funded entirely by my savings account, but that was just the beginning. What I discovered next about my stepfamily's secret spending habits would shatter everything I thought I knew about the people I'd trusted most, and force me to choose between keeping the peace and fighting for what was rightfully mine. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The knock on my bedroom door came at exactly 11:17 p.m. on a Tuesday night. I remember the time because I'd been staring at the clock on my laptop, debating whether to finish one more chapter of the financial planning course I'd been taking online. Living in our 3-bedroom house in Willowbrook had its advantages: cheap rent, a decent neighborhood, and the comfort of family nearby. But it also meant that emergencies had a way of becoming everyone's problem. "Olivia, honey, I'm so sorry to bother you this late." Cathy's voice came through the door, tinged with that particular mix of urgency and embarrassment that I'd learned to recognize over the years. "Can I come in for just a second?" I closed my laptop and called for her to enter. Cathy stepped into my room, wearing her favorite purple bathrobe, the one with tiny flowers that she'd had since before Dad married her 8 years ago. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she had that frazzled look she got when something unexpected happened. "What's wrong?" I asked, immediately concerned. It wasn't like Cathy to disturb me this late, unless something was genuinely urgent. She twisted her hands together, a nervous habit I'd noticed whenever she had to ask for help. "I feel terrible asking, but I need to run to Moonridge Market for some groceries. Harper's been sick all day, and I just realized we're completely out of everything: medicine, soup, bread, you name it. The poor thing can barely keep anything down." I glanced toward the wall that separated my room from Harper's. My stepsister had indeed been quieter than usual today, which was saying something since Harper was typically the life of every room she entered. At 19, she was 3 years younger than me, but had always been the social butterfly of our family, constantly out with friends, or posting updates about her latest adventures. "Of course," I said without hesitation. "Do you need me to drive you? The roads are pretty icy tonight." Cathy shook her head quickly. No, you've got work tomorrow." Well, this is embarrassing, but I left my purse at the office today. Completely forgot it when I rushed out for my dentist appointment. "Would it be possible to borrow your debit card? I promise I'll pay you back first thing tomorrow when I can get to the ATM." I didn't even pause to consider it. This was Cathy, the woman who had stepped into my life when I was 12 years old, and mourning my biological mother's death. She'd attended every school event, helped me through my awkward teenage years, and celebrated every achievement as if I were her own daughter. More importantly, she'd never asked me for money before, not once in all these years. "Absolutely," I said, reaching for my wallet on the nightstand. I pulled out my navy blue debit card and handed it to her. "The PIN is 0847, my birthday month and day. Don't worry about paying me back right away. Family helps family, right?" Relief flooded her face as she took the card. "You're an angel, Olivia. I promise I'll just get the basics. Some of that expensive organic soup Harper likes when she's sick, maybe some of those crackers that settle her stomach, and definitely some of that herbal tea blend. You know how particular she gets when she's not feeling well." I smiled, remembering Harper's previous bouts of illness. My stepsister had always been somewhat high maintenance when it came to being sick, preferring specific brands and organic options that cost more than regular groceries. But if it helped her feel better, it was worth it. "Take whatever you need," I assured her. "My account should have around $9,000 in it. I just got my quarterly bonus from Morrison & Associates last week." Cathy's eyes widened slightly. "9,000, Olivia, that's wonderful. Your dad and I are so proud of how well you're doing with your accounting career. But don't worry, I'm only talking about maybe $50 or $60 worth of groceries. I'll have this back to you before you even notice it's gone." She leaned down and gave me a quick hug, the familiar scent of her lavender perfume enveloping me. "Thank you so much, sweetheart. I know it's late, but Moonridge Market is open until midnight, and I want to get this taken care of tonight, so Harper can start feeling better tomorrow." After she left, I settled back into my studies, feeling good about being able to help. That's what family was for, after all. My phone sat silently on the nightstand, and I made a mental note to text Cathy in the morning to make sure Harper was feeling better. I eventually fell asleep around 12:30 a.m., my laptop still warm beside me, and my financial planning textbook open to a chapter on emergency fund management. The irony of that detail wouldn't hit me until much later. When I woke up at 7:15 a.m., my phone was buzzing like an angry wasp. Not the gentle morning alarm I'd set, but the rapid-fire notifications that usually meant something had gone wrong. I reached for it groggily, expecting maybe a work emergency or news about a family member. Instead, my screen was filled with bank notifications, 17 of them, to be exact. The first one made me sit up straight. Withdrawal, $800 at Moonridge ATM, 11:47 p.m. The second one made my stomach drop. Purchase, $1,200 at Prestige Boutique, 11:52 p.m. By the time I scrolled through them all, my hands were shaking. This wasn't $50 worth of groceries. This was a systematic draining of my account that had continued until 2:30 a.m., hitting stores I'd never heard of, and making purchases that had nothing to do with soup and crackers. I opened my banking app with trembling fingers. The number at the top of the screen felt like a physical blow. $487.23. My careful savings, my emergency fund, my security blanket, nearly all of it was gone. But the real shock was yet to come. As I sat there staring at my phone, trying to process what had happened, I mindlessly opened Instagram. It was part of my morning routine, something I did without thinking while my brain slowly woke up. Harper's story notification sat at the top of my feed, a bright pink circle indicating she'd posted something new. I tapped on it, expecting maybe a photo of tissues and medicine, some sympathy-seeking post about being sick. Instead, my world tilted completely off its axis. The first photo showed Harper grinning widely, very much not looking sick, holding up a designer handbag that still had the price tag visible, $1,200. The timestamp read 11:58 p.m., just 6 minutes after the Prestige Boutique charge on my account. The second photo was a mirror selfie in what looked like an upscale dressing room, Harper trying on an expensive-looking dress, with several other items hanging in the background. The timestamp 12:15 a.m. The third photo was a group shot of Harper and several friends at what appeared to be a late-night spa, all of them with face masks and cucumber slices over their eyes. The caption read, "When your bestie surprises you with a midnight spa session because you've been so stressed lately. #blessed, #spoiled rotten, #midnight treatment." Timestamp 1:45 a.m. I scrolled through the entire story, my disbelief growing with each image. Harper at a jewelry store trying on earrings. Harper and her friends at an expensive sushi restaurant. Harper getting her nails done at a salon that I knew charged $150 for a full set. Every single timestamp corresponded perfectly with the charges showing up in my banking notifications. The final story post was a boomerang video of Harper laughing with her friends, all of them loaded down with shopping bags from high-end stores. The caption made my blood run cold. Best night ever. Mom's emergency grocery run turned into emergency retail therapy. #mom's money #retail therapy #living my best life. I set my phone down carefully, as if it might explode. The quiet of my room suddenly felt oppressive, the walls seeming to close in around me. In the space of 8 hours, my family had stolen over $8,400 from me, and then documented the entire theft on social media for the world to see. The woman I'd called mom for 8 years had looked me in the eye, lied about a family emergency, and then taken my hard-earned money to fund her daughter's shopping spree. And Harper, my stepsister who I'd genuinely worried about when I thought she was sick, had been posting about it online like it was some kind of joke. I could hear movement in the kitchen downstairs, the familiar sounds of Cathy making her morning coffee. Part of me wanted to storm down there and confront her immediately, to throw my phone in her face and demand an explanation. But something deeper, some instinct born from years of watching family dynamics, told me to be smarter than that. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This wasn't just about money. This was about trust, about family, about the fact that the people closest to me had planned and executed a deliberate betrayal. And if I was going to handle this properly, I needed to think it through carefully. I took screenshots of every single one of Harper's story posts, making sure the timestamps were clearly visible. Then I photographed each bank notification, creating a digital trail that even they couldn't deny. Whatever came next, I was going to be prepared. The sound of Cathy's laughter drifted up from the kitchen, and I realized she was probably on the phone with someone, maybe sharing details about their successful night out. The casualness of it all, the fact that they could steal from me, and then go about their morning routine as if nothing had happened, was almost more shocking than the theft itself. I looked around my room, at the financial planning books on my desk, the carefully organized budget spreadsheets, the vision board where I'd mapped out my 5-year savings goals. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd planned, had been casually destroyed by the people I'd trusted most. But as I sat there in the morning light, my phone heavy with evidence in my hands, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about getting my money back anymore. This was about discovering who my family really was, and deciding who I was going to be in response. The girl who would have gone downstairs and cried and begged for an explanation was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone smarter, someone who understood that when people show you who they really are, you should believe them. And Cathy and Harper had just shown me exactly who they were. I spent the next hour in my room, going through every single transaction with the methodical precision I'd learned in my accounting courses. Each charge told a story, and together they painted a picture of a night I hadn't been invited to witness. The timeline was devastatingly clear. At 11:47 p.m., just 30 minutes after taking my card, Cathy had made the first withdrawal, $800 in cash from the Moonridge ATM. That ATM was conveniently located right next to Prestige Boutique, where exactly 5 minutes later, she'd spent $1,200 on what Harper's Instagram revealed to be that designer handbag. From there the spending spree had moved through Willowbrook's upscale shopping district like a tornado. Luxe Jewelry Emporium, $950 for what appeared to be diamond earrings. Serenity Spa and Wellness, $650 for their Midnight Goddess package that included facials, massages, and nail treatments for multiple people. Sakura Sushi Bar, $380 for what looked like an elaborate dinner for 5 people. Each charge came with its own Instagram documentation, complete with timestamps and gleeful captions. Harper hadn't just stolen from me, she'd created a social media diary of the theft, as if she wanted the whole world to see how easy it had been to spend my money. But it was the smaller details that cut the deepest. At 1:15 a.m., there was a $45 charge at Moonridge Market, the only actual grocery store on the entire list. I pulled up Harper's story again, and found the corresponding post, a photo of her and her friends in the snack aisle, arms full of expensive imported chocolates and artisanal sodas. The caption read, "Grabbing some groceries for our sleepover. #technically groceries #loophole life." They'd actually gone to the grocery store, just not for the reasons Cathy had told me. And even there they'd managed to spend more on luxury snacks than most families spent on a week's worth of actual food. I opened my laptop and started building a spreadsheet, categorizing each expense and cross-referencing it with Harper's social media posts. Years of accounting work had taught me that numbers don't lie, but they also don't tell the whole story without context. And the context here was damning. The total came to $8,413.67, leaving me with $486.33 in an account that had held $8,900 just 8 hours earlier. But the financial impact was only part of the damage. I pulled up my other accounts, checking to make sure this was contained to just my checking account. My savings account, thank God, was untouched. I'd never given Cathy that card or PIN. But even so, the money in my checking account represented months of careful budgeting and saving. I'd been putting aside money for a security deposit on my own apartment, something I'd been planning for over a year. Living with Dad and Cathy had been fine while I was getting established in my career, but at 22, I was ready for independence. The money they'd stolen wasn't just my emergency fund, it was my ticket to freedom. As I sat there calculating the real cost of their betrayal, my phone rang. Dad's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I felt a surge of hope. Maybe he'd found out what happened. Maybe he was calling to apologize and fix this. Morning sunshine, his cheerful voice filled the room. "How's my favorite accountant doing today?" "Dad, I started, but he cut me off. Listen, I'm calling because Cathy mentioned you were incredibly sweet last night, helping out with Harper's emergency. She told me how generous you were with your card when Harper was feeling so sick. I just wanted you to know how proud I am of you for being such a good big sister." The words hit me like a physical slap. Cathy had already gotten to him, spinning the story to make it sound like I'd knowingly participated in their spending spree. And Dad, trusting and good-hearted as always, had bought it completely. "Dad, about that," I tried again. I know you don't need thanks for helping family. That's just who you are, Olivia. Always putting others first. Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become." The mention of my biological mother, the woman whose death had brought Cathy into our lives, made my throat close up. I couldn't tell him the truth over the phone, not when he was talking about her memory. This conversation needed to happen in person, with evidence, in a way that couldn't be dismissed or reframed. "Thanks, Dad," I managed. "We'll talk more when you get home from work, okay?" "Of course, love you, kiddo." After he hung up, I stared at my phone, realizing that Cathy's strategy was more sophisticated than I'd initially thought. She hadn't just stolen my money, she'd preemptively controlled the narrative. By the time I was even aware of what had happened, she'd already painted me as a willing participant to the one person whose opinion mattered most to me. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly minimized my spreadsheet. A soft knock came at my door, followed by Cathy's voice, artificially bright and cheerful. "Olivia, are you awake, honey? I wanted to thank you again for last night." "Come in," I called, my voice carefully neutral. Cathy entered carrying a steaming mug of coffee, my favorite vanilla hazelnut blend, and wearing the same purple bathrobe from the night before. But now, knowing what I knew, everything about her seemed different. The smile that had always seemed warm now looked calculating. The maternal concern in her eyes now felt like performance art. "I brought you some coffee," she said, setting the mug on my nightstand. "I figured you might need it after staying up so late studying. I saw your light on until pretty late." I accepted the coffee with a neutral thank you, watching her face carefully. There was no guilt there, no shame, no indication that anything unusual had happened. She was acting exactly as she would on any other morning, as if she hadn't spent the night systematically draining my bank account. "How's Harper feeling?" I asked, testing the waters. Cathy's face immediately shifted into concerned mother mode. "Oh, much better. It's amazing what a good night's rest can do. She was so grateful for the medicine and soup we were able to get. I think she'll be back to her normal self today." The lie came so easily, so naturally, that I almost admired the skill of it. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment deception. This was practiced, polished, the work of someone who'd done this before. "That's wonderful," I replied, taking a sip of coffee and maintaining eye contact. "I'm so glad I could help with the groceries." Something flickered in her eyes then, just for a second. A quick assessment, as if she was checking to see how much I knew or suspected. But it passed quickly, replaced by that same warm smile. "You're such a good sister to her, Olivia. And such a good daughter to me. I hope you know how much that means." After she left, I sat in the silence of my room, coffee growing cold in my hands. The casual nature of her deception was almost more disturbing than the theft itself. This wasn't a moment of weakness, or a desperate act. This was deliberate, planned, and executed with the confidence of someone who believed they could get away with it. I opened my laptop again, and began researching. If Cathy and Harper had done this to me, had they done it to others? I started with social media, looking through Harper's older posts for any signs of unexplained wealth or suspicious spending patterns. What I found made my stomach turn. Over the past 6 months, Harper's Instagram showed a steady escalation in expensive items and experiences. Designer clothes, luxury spa visits, expensive dinners at high-end restaurants. For a 19-year-old with no job, the spending pattern was impossible to explain through legitimate means. But it was the captions that really caught my attention. "Mom's emergency grocery money strikes again." From 3 months ago, posted alongside a photo of new designer shoes. "When you're sick but retail therapy is the best medicine." From 2 months ago, showing off expensive makeup and jewelry. This wasn't their first time. This was a pattern, a system, a way of life that they'd perfected over months or possibly years. And I was just the latest victim in what appeared to be an ongoing scam. I scrolled further back, looking for more evidence, and found posts from other family members and friends. Comments from relatives asking Harper where she got the money for such expensive things. Responses from Cathy deflecting questions about Harper's spending. A concerning pattern of expensive gifts that didn't match either of their supposed incomes. The more I dug, the clearer it became that this went far beyond a single night's betrayal. This was systematic financial abuse disguised as family generosity, and I had been the perfect target. Trusting, financially stable, and living under the same roof, where my spending habits and account balances were easy to observe. I thought about all the times over the past year, when Cathy had asked casual questions about my work, my salary, my savings goals. Questions that had seemed like normal parental interest at the time, but now felt like reconnaissance missions. She'd been gathering information, building a profile, waiting for the right moment to strike. The coffee had gone completely cold, but I didn't notice. I was too busy calculating not just what I'd lost, but what this meant for my future. The money was gone, but the trust was destroyed. And in a family, trust was supposed to be the foundation of everything. I looked around my room again, at all the plans and dreams I'd been building. The apartment fund was gone, but more than that, my sense of safety in my own home was gone. How could I continue living here, knowing what I knew? How could I sit at the dinner table and pretend everything was normal when the people across from me had proven they saw me not as family, but as a mark? But even as the full scope of the betrayal became clear, something else was crystallizing in my mind. They'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. They'd assumed I would either never notice the charges, or would be too trusting to question them. They'd gambled that family loyalty would keep me quiet even if I did figure it out. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I saved my spreadsheet and opened a new document. If this was war, I was going to document every battle. And the first rule of warfare is knowing your enemy better than they know themselves. I had 8.5 hours until Dad got home from work. 8.5 hours to gather evidence, build my case, and prepare for the conversation that would change everything. Time to get to work. By 10 a.m., I had established my base of operations. I'd moved my laptop to the small desk in the corner of my room, spread out notebooks and printed bank statements, and created what looked like a detective's war room. The coffee Cathy had brought me sat untouched and cold. I couldn't bring myself to drink anything she'd given me, not when I was beginning to understand the depth of her deception. My first priority was securing evidence before it could disappear. Harper's Instagram stories would vanish in 24 hours, so I used a screen recording app to capture every single post, making sure the timestamps were clearly visible. I also took individual screenshots as backup, organizing them in a folder labeled Evidence Harper Social Media. But I needed more than just social media posts. I called Moonridge Bank's customer service line, prepared to wait on hold for as long as it took. Moonridge Bank, this is Kevin. How can I help you today? Hi Kevin, this is Olivia Carter. I need to report unauthorized use of my debit card and request detailed transaction records for the past 24 hours. I'm sorry to hear that, Miss Carter. Let me pull up your account. Can you verify your social security number and the address on file? After going through the security questions, Kevin's tone became more serious. I see the activity you're referring to. That's quite a lot of transactions in a short time period. Were you the one making these purchases? No, absolutely not. Someone else had access to my card and PIN, and they've drained my account. I understand. I'm going to start a fraud investigation immediately and send you detailed statements showing exactly when and where each transaction occurred. I'm also placing a hold on your card right now to prevent any additional unauthorized use. You should receive new cards within 3 to 5 business days. Kevin was thorough and sympathetic, explaining the bank's fraud protection policies and what evidence would be needed for the investigation. But one thing he said stuck with me. Miss Carter, I have to tell you, the fact that someone had both your card and your PIN suggests this was someone with intimate access to your personal information. Do you have any idea who might have had that level of access? Yes, I said quietly. I'm pretty sure I know exactly who did this. In cases involving family members or people close to the account holder, we recommend documenting everything possible before confronting the individuals involved. People sometimes try to cover their tracks once they know they've been discovered. After hanging up with the bank, I realized Kevin was right. If I confronted Cathy and Harper now, they'd have time to coordinate their stories, delete evidence, or even turn Dad against me before I could present my case. I needed to gather more information while they still thought they'd gotten away with it. I started with what I could access from my room. Using my laptop, I began searching for any other online evidence of their spending habits. Harper's Facebook page showed similar patterns: expensive items, luxury experiences, all funded by mysterious sources. But it was her TikTok account that provided the most damning evidence. Harper had posted a video 2 weeks ago titled POV, "Your mom gives you money for emergencies, but you define emergency differently than she does." The video showed her getting ready for a night out, putting on expensive clothes and jewelry, while text overlays revealed the supposed emergencies. Need new outfit for date emergency. Ran out of expensive skincare emergency. Friends want to go to expensive restaurant social emergency. The video had over 50,000 views and hundreds of comments, many from other young people sharing similar stories about manipulating their parents for money. But what caught my attention were the comments from people who seemed to know Harper personally, congratulating her on her system, and asking for advice on how to get money from family members. I screenshotted everything, building a comprehensive digital trail that showed this wasn't impulsive behavior, it was calculated manipulation that Harper was actually proud of. Next, I needed to understand the financial scope of their operation. I couldn't access their bank accounts, but I could piece together information from what they'd shared publicly. I created a timeline going back 6 months, tracking every expensive purchase Harper had posted about, and trying to match them with any legitimate income sources. Harper didn't have a job, I knew that for certain. Cathy worked as a receptionist at Morrison & Associates, the same accounting firm where I worked, but in a different department. Her salary was decent but nowhere near enough to fund the lifestyle Harper was living. Dad made good money as a project manager for a construction company, but he was careful with finances and had always been proud of his budgeting skills. The math didn't add up unless there was money coming from somewhere else, or someone else. Around noon, I heard Harper's voice downstairs, talking to someone on the phone. I crept to my door and listened, trying to catch fragments of conversation. Totally worked again, Harper was saying, her voice carrying the excited energy she got when she was gossiping. She literally just handed it over. I couldn't make out everything, but I heard enough to confirm what I suspected. This wasn't their first time, and they had a system. I decided to do some reconnaissance. Putting on headphones and pretending to listen to music, I went downstairs to get some water from the kitchen. Harper was sprawled on the living room couch, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in the rapid-fire way she did when she was excited. And the best part is, she totally believed the sick story, Harper was saying as I passed through. Mom is literally such a good actress, we should have recorded it for TikTok. I kept walking to the kitchen, filling a glass with water while straining to hear more. I know, right? And she makes so much money at that accounting job, she probably won't even miss it. It's not like we're hurting her or anything. The casual cruelty of that statement hit me like a physical blow. She probably won't even miss it. As if my money, my savings, my financial security, were just playthings for their entertainment. I walked back upstairs, careful to keep my expression neutral in case Harper looked up from her phone call. But inside I was burning with a cold, focused anger that I'd never felt before. Back in my room, I opened a new document and started writing down everything I'd overheard. If this ever went to court, I wanted to have a record of every admission, every casual reference to their system, every indication that this was premeditated fraud. Then I had an idea. If Harper was comfortable posting about her scams on social media, if she was bragging to friends about her system, maybe she'd documented other instances too. I started searching through her old posts more systematically, looking for patterns. What I found was a masterclass in family manipulation. Posts from months ago, showing expensive items with captions like "When you tell mom you need emergency money for textbooks but Urban Outfitters was having a sale, and the emergency fund strikes again. Mom thinks I'm buying groceries but Sephora is basically food for the soul, right?" Each post had dozens of likes and comments from friends who seemed to think this behavior was hilarious rather than criminal. Harper had built an entire social media persona around scamming family members, and her friends were encouraging it. But the most damning evidence came from a post dated 3 months ago. Harper had shared a photo of herself and Cathy at an expensive spa, both of them getting facials and massages. The caption read, "Mother-daughter bonding time. Thanks to Olivia's emergency grocery fund for making this possible. #sisterly generosity #family funds #creative accounting." They'd done this before, not just to me, but using my money specifically. And they'd been bragging about it online, treating my financial trust like a joke to share with their followers. I screenshot the post, noting that it had been up for months without me seeing it. I wasn't following Harper's accounts closely. I'd always respected her privacy and assumed she'd share anything important with me directly. My trust in family privacy had made me the perfect victim. Around 2 p.m., I heard Cathy come home from her half-day at work. I listened to her and Harper talking downstairs, their voices animated and happy. At one point, I heard Cathy laugh and say something about emergency groceries, followed by Harper's distinctive giggle. They were celebrating. While I was upstairs discovering the full scope of their betrayal, they were downstairs congratulating themselves on a successful scam. I needed an ally, someone who could provide objective perspective and possibly help me navigate what came next. I thought about my options carefully. My coworkers were too close to the situation since Cathy worked at the same firm. My college friends were great for emotional support, but didn't have experience with this kind of family crisis. Then I remembered my Aunt Amelia, Dad's sister who lived across town in the suburbs. Amelia was a paralegal with experience in family law, and she'd always been the practical, no-nonsense member of our extended family. More importantly, she'd never fully warmed to Cathy, though she'd been polite for Dad's sake. I called her from my room, speaking quietly. "Olivia, what a nice surprise. How are you, honey?" "Aunt Amelia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to promise you won't say anything to Dad until I'm ready to tell him myself." Her tone immediately became serious. "What's going on?" I explained the situation, reading her the timeline of transactions and describing Harper's social media documentation. Amelia listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of disbelief or anger. $8,000, she finally said. "Olivia, this isn't just theft, this is systematic fraud. And the fact that they've done it before, that they're bragging about it online, this is criminal behavior." "I know, but they're family, and Dad loves Cathy. I don't know how to handle this without destroying everything." "Honey, they're the ones who destroyed it when they decided to steal from you. You documenting their crime isn't what's breaking up the family, their crime is what's breaking up the family." Amelia's perspective was exactly what I needed. She helped me organize my evidence, suggested additional documentation I should gather, and explained what legal options might be available. The social media posts are golden, she said. Criminals usually try to hide their crimes, but Harper's actually advertising hers. That's going to make this case incredibly easy to prove. By 4 p.m., I had built a comprehensive case file, bank statements, social media screenshots, recorded conversations, timeline analysis, and a detailed written account of the deception. Everything was organized, cross-referenced, and backed up in multiple locations. But I also had something else, a plan. Amelia had helped me think through the best way to present this information to Dad, how to control the narrative before Cathy could spin it, and what legal steps I should be prepared to take. As I heard Dad's car pull into the driveway at 5:30 p.m., I felt a strange sense of calm. The girl who had trustingly handed over her debit card the night before was gone. In her place was someone harder, smarter, and absolutely determined to make sure that Cathy and Harper faced consequences for what they'd done. The confrontation was coming, and I was ready for it. Dad's arrival home that evening followed the same routine it had for years. I heard his car door slam, the jingle of keys at the front door, and his cheerful "Honey, I'm home" called out to the house. What followed, however, was anything but routine. I positioned myself at the top of the stairs, listening as Cathy greeted him with unusual enthusiasm. Their voices carried clearly up to where I stood, and what I heard made my blood run cold. "David, you won't believe how generous Olivia was last night," Cathy was saying, her voice dripping with false warmth. She insisted on treating Harper to a real girls' night out when she heard how stressed Harper's been about starting college in the fall. My father's confused response was exactly what I'd expected. "Treating Harper, what do you mean?" "Oh, it was so sweet," Cathy continued, her lie building momentum. "Olivia said Harper deserved to celebrate getting into state university, so she gave me her card and told us to have fun. We got some shopping done, went to that nice spa Harper's been wanting to try, had a lovely dinner. Olivia was so adamant that we not worry about the cost." Harper's voice joined in, perfectly on cue. "Olivia was amazing, Dad. She said she wanted to celebrate my acceptance letter, and that I should pick out some nice things for college. I tried to tell her it was too much, but she insisted." I gripped the stair railing, listening to them construct an elaborate fiction where I was not only a willing participant, but the instigator of their spending spree. They were rewriting history in real time, creating a version of events that painted them as grateful recipients rather than thieves. "That's my girl," Dad said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. "Always looking out for her little sister. How much did she end up spending on you two?" There was a pause, and I could practically feel Cathy calculating how to answer. "Oh, you know Olivia, she told us not to worry about the total. Just to have fun and celebrate as a family." "Well, I'll have to thank her," Dad said. "It means a lot that she's so generous with Harper, especially when money's been tight for us lately." Money's been tight for them. That was news to me, and it explained a lot about their motivation. But it also revealed something else. They'd been planning this for a while, waiting for the right moment when they could justify the theft as somehow beneficial for the family. I waited until I heard Dad go upstairs to change out of his work clothes, then intercepted him in the hallway outside his bedroom. "Dad, can we talk, privately?" He looked surprised but nodded. "Of course, sweetheart, everything okay?" I guided him into his bedroom and closed the door, noting how Cathy immediately appeared in the hallway, clearly trying to eavesdrop on our conversation. "Dad, I need to show you something, and I need you to listen to the whole story before you say anything." I pulled out my phone and opened the folder of evidence I'd compiled. Dad sat on the edge of his bed, looking concerned as I began explaining what had really happened the night before. "She told me Harper was sick and needed emergency groceries," I began, showing him the timeline of charges. "Look at these transactions, Dad. Look at the times and amounts." Dad studied my phone screen, his expression growing more confused with each charge. "Olivia, these amounts, this can't be right. Cathy said you wanted to treat Harper, but this is over $8,000. "Keep looking," I said, swiping to Harper's Instagram posts. "Look at the timestamps, look at what they were actually doing with my money." As Dad scrolled through Harper's social media documentation, I watched his face change. The confusion gave way to shock, then to something I'd never seen from him before, real anger. "She was posting about this," he said, his voice tight. "She was bragging about spending your money. There's more, Dad. This isn't the first time they've done this." I showed him the older posts, the pattern of emergency spending, the casual references to scamming family members. Dad was quiet for a long time, studying each piece of evidence. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with a mixture of hurt and rage that made my heart ache for him. "I need to talk to Cathy," he said, standing up. "Dad, wait, there's something else you need to know. They're already spinning this story. They told you I willingly gave them permission to spend my money, that I wanted to treat Harper to celebrate college. They've been preparing their defense since this morning." Dad's jaw clenched. "Are you telling me they lied to my face when I walked in the door?" "I'm telling you they're going to lie about everything, and they're going to make me sound like I'm being unreasonable or vindictive. They've had all day to coordinate their story." Dad was quiet for another moment, then nodded grimly. "Then let's go downstairs together and hear what they have to say," when confronted with the evidence. The family meeting that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Dad called for Cathy and Harper to join us in the living room, his voice carrying an authority that immediately put them on alert. "Cathy, I need you to explain something to me," Dad began, his tone deceptively calm. "Olivia has shown me some concerning information about last night, and I'd like to hear your version of events." Cathy's performance was masterful. She sat forward on the couch, her expression shifting to concerned confusion. "David, what's wrong? I told you what happened when you got home." "Olivia was wonderful to Harper. According to these bank statements," Dad said, holding up my phone, "Olivia's account was charged over $8,000 between 11:30 p.m. and 2:30 a.m. Can you explain that?" "Well, yes," Cathy said, barely missing a beat. "Like I said, Olivia insisted we have a real celebration for Harper. She was very specific about wanting us to get nice things, to not worry about the cost." Harper nodded eagerly. "Dad, Olivia literally told us to go all out. She said I deserved it for getting into college and that she wanted to do something special for me." I watched Dad's face as they delivered their lies with such conviction that I almost wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing. But then he pulled up Harper's Instagram posts on my phone. "Harper, can you explain this caption?" he read aloud. "Mom's emergency grocery money strikes again. Thanks to Olivia's gullible trust for making this possible." With laughing emojis. The color drained from Harper's face. She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked desperately at Cathy for help. Cathy's recovery was swift, but not swift enough. "David, you know how kids are on social media. They exaggerate everything, make jokes out of nothing. Harper probably just thought it was funny to pretend like we were being sneaky when Olivia had been so generous." "And this video," Dad continued, navigating to Harper's TikTok. "The one where she explains her system for getting money from family members for fake emergencies." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Cathy seemed to struggle with explaining away video evidence of Harper teaching other people how to manipulate their families. "David," Cathy finally said, her voice taking on a sharp edge I'd rarely heard before. "I don't know why Olivia is trying to make this into something it isn't. We had a lovely family evening, and now she's acting like we committed some kind of crime." "You did commit a crime," I said quietly. "You lied to me about Harper being sick. You lied about needing money for groceries. You took my debit card under false pretenses, and spent over $8,000 on luxury items while documenting the entire theft on social media." Cathy's mask finally began to slip. "Theft? Olivia, you gave me that card willingly. I'm your mother." "You're not my mother," I cut her off. "My mother died when I was 12. You're my father's wife, and you're a thief." The room erupted. Harper started crying, claiming I was being cruel and unfair. Cathy began a rapid-fire defense that contradicted itself multiple times within minutes. And Dad just sat there, looking at the woman he'd married, and realizing that he didn't know her at all. "Enough," Dad finally said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Everyone stopped talking. The silence that followed was heavy with tension and broken trust. "Cathy," Dad said slowly, "I want you to look me in the eye and tell me honestly, did you or did you not take Olivia's debit card under false pretenses last night?" Cathy's response revealed everything about who she really was. Instead of admitting the truth, instead of apologizing, she attacked. "David, I can't believe you're taking her side over your own wife. Olivia has always been jealous of Harper, and now she's trying to destroy our family, because she can't stand that you love someone other than her precious dead mother." The cruelty of that statement hit Dad like a physical blow. He actually recoiled, and I saw something die in his eyes, not just love for Cathy, but trust in his own judgment for having married her. Harper, perhaps sensing that Cathy's strategy was backfiring, tried a different approach. "Dad, I'm sorry if the social media posts looked bad. I was just trying to be funny. But Olivia really did say we could spend her money. Maybe she's forgotten because she was tired. I have a recording of our conversation from last night. I said quietly. On my phone, would you like to hear exactly what was said? It was a bluff, I didn't have a recording. But the immediate panic in both of their faces told Dad everything he needed to know. You recorded them? Cathy asked, her voice shrill. I didn't record anything, I clarified. But your reaction just confirmed that you know exactly what you said to me last night, and it wasn't asking permission to spend $8,000 on a shopping spree. Dad stood up slowly, his face a mask of controlled fury. I think, he said carefully, that everyone needs to take some time to think about what's happened here. Cathy, Harper, I want you both to go to your rooms, while Olivia and I continue this conversation. David, you can't seriously be, Cathy began. Now, Dad said, his voice carrying a finality that even Cathy couldn't argue with. After they left, Dad turned to me with exhaustion written across his features. Olivia, I'm so sorry, I don't know how I missed this, how I didn't see what they were capable of. They're good at it, Dad. They've been practicing. What do you want to do? Do you want to press charges? Do you want them out of the house? Just tell me what you need. I looked at my father, this good honest man who'd been manipulated just as thoroughly as I had, and realized that my next decision would determine not just my future, but his as well. I want my money back, I said. All of it, and I want a guarantee that this will never happen again. You'll get your money back, Dad promised. Even if I have to pay it myself. But Olivia, I don't think I can stay married to someone who would do this to my daughter. And I don't think you should have to live in the same house with people who see you as a target instead of family. The conversation that had started with me trying to expose Cathy and Harper's theft had become something much bigger, the end of my father's marriage, and the destruction of the only family structure I'd known since I was 12. But as I sat there with Dad, both of us processing the magnitude of what had been revealed, I realized something important. Sometimes the only way to save a family is to cut out the parts that are poisoning it. And Cathy and Harper had poisoned everything they'd touched. The house was different the next morning. The easy familiarity that had defined our family dynamic for 8 years was gone, replaced by a tense formality that made every interaction feel like a negotiation. Dad had slept in the guest room, and I could hear Cathy crying behind their bedroom door well into the night. I woke up early and found Dad in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee that had clearly gone cold hours ago. He looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. Morning, Dad, I said softly, not wanting to startle him. He looked up with tired eyes. Morning, sweetheart. How are you holding up? Better than you, I think. I poured myself coffee and sat across from him at our small breakfast table. Have you decided what you're going to do? Dad was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the backyard, where he'd taught Harper to ride a bike years ago. I've been thinking about that all night. This isn't just about the money, Olivia. It's about the lying, the manipulation, the way they turned you into a target in your own home. I know, I keep trying to figure out how I missed it, he continued, his voice heavy with self-blame. How many other times did they do this? How many emergencies that I helped fund were actually just cover stories for stealing from other people? It was a question I'd been wondering about too. I'd spent the early morning hours going through my own financial records, looking for any other unexplained charges or suspicious activity. What I'd found wasn't definitive, but it was troubling. Dad, I think there might be more. Look at this. I showed him my phone, where I'd pulled up a charge from 3 months ago, $400 at an electronics store. I remember questioning this at the time. Cathy said Harper needed a new laptop for college prep courses, and that you'd agreed to let them use my card since yours was maxed out from the car repair. Dad frowned. I never agreed to that. And our cards weren't maxed out 3 months ago. There's more, I said, swiping to additional charges. This $200 at Target, supposedly for Harper's dorm room supplies. This $350 at a department store, supposedly back-to-school clothes that you'd approved. Every time I questioned a charge, Cathy had an explanation that involved you giving permission. The pattern was clear. They'd been using my trust and Dad's authorization to steal smaller amounts over months, building up to the big score from 2 nights ago. But they'd gotten sloppy with the large amount, and Harper's social media addiction had provided the evidence that finally exposed them. This is worse than I thought, Dad said, running his hands through his hair. They've been running a systematic con on both of us. What are you going to do about it? Dad was quiet for another long moment, then looked at me with the first hint of resolve I'd seen from him since yesterday. I'm going to talk to a lawyer. This isn't just a family dispute anymore. This is fraud, and it needs to be handled properly. You mean divorce? I mean everything. Divorce, criminal charges if necessary, whatever it takes to make sure they face consequences, and you get your money back. I felt a complicated mix of relief and sadness. Relief that Dad was taking this seriously, sadness that it had come to this. But then I thought about Harper's casual cruelty, Cathy's skillful manipulation, and their complete lack of remorse when confronted with evidence of their crimes. There's something else we need to discuss, I said. I don't think I can keep living here while this gets sorted out. Not with them. Dad nodded immediately. I've been thinking the same thing. This house isn't safe for you anymore, not when they see you as a target rather than family. We talked through the logistics. I had some money left in my savings account, not enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on my own place, but enough to stay in an extended stay hotel for a few weeks while we figured out next steps. Dad offered to help with the costs, but I declined. I needed to handle this myself, to prove to myself that I could rebuild independently. What about your job? Dad asked. Cathy works at Morrison & Associates too. I've been thinking about that. I need to talk to HR today, explain the situation, and see if there's any way to make sure this doesn't affect my work environment. At 9 a.m., I called in sick to work, and instead drove to the Morrison & Associates office to speak with Jennifer Walsh, our HR director. Jennifer was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, who'd always been fair and professional in our limited interactions. Olivia, what can I do for you? She asked, gesturing for me to sit in her office. I explained the situation carefully, showing her the evidence I'd compiled, and explaining that charges might be filed against Cathy. Jennifer listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes. This is a serious situation, she said when I finished. And you're right to be concerned about the workplace dynamic. Let me ask you this, do you feel comfortable continuing to work here while this is resolved? I love my job, I said honestly. And I need the income now more than ever. But I can't work effectively if I'm constantly worried about Cathy trying to sabotage me, or gather information about my finances. Jennifer nodded. I understand. Let me see what options we have. There might be a way to adjust schedules or assignments to minimize contact between you two, while this is being resolved. She also suggested that I document any interactions with Cathy at work, just in case. If she tries to use her position here to harass you, or interfere with your work, that becomes a company problem, not just a personal one. After leaving the HR office, I drove to a bank branch across town, and opened a new account with a different bank entirely. I transferred what remained of my savings, and had new cards issued. If Cathy had somehow gotten access to my PIN or account information, I wasn't taking any chances. The next stop was Aunt Amelia's house. I'd called her that morning, and asked if we could meet to discuss legal options. She'd agreed immediately, and had already reached out to a colleague who specialized in family law and fraud cases. His name is Wilson Wild, Amelia explained as we sat in her living room. He's handled cases like this before, including situations where family members have committed financial fraud against each other. Wilson arrived at 2 p.m. carrying a briefcase and a legal pad covered in notes. He was younger than I'd expected, probably in his early 30s, but his questions were thorough, and his analysis was sharp. This is a strong case, he said after reviewing all my evidence. The social media posts alone are incredibly damning. Most fraud cases rely on financial records and witness testimony, but you have the perpetrators literally documenting their crimes and bragging about them online. What are my options? I asked. Several: civil recovery to get your money back, that's almost guaranteed with this evidence. Criminal charges for fraud and theft, also very likely to succeed. And if your father moves forward with divorce proceedings, this evidence will be crucial in ensuring Cathy doesn't get to claim any marital assets. Wilson explained the process, timelines and likely outcomes. The civil case could move quickly, especially if Cathy agreed to settle rather than face criminal charges. The criminal case would take longer, but would ensure there were legal consequences for their actions. There's one more thing to consider, Wilson said. Based on the pattern of behavior you've described, it's possible there are other victims. Other family members, friends, maybe even strangers they've scammed. If this goes to criminal court, those other victims might come forward. The idea that Cathy and Harper might have been running similar scams on other people hadn't fully occurred to me, but it made sense. People this skilled at manipulation rarely limit themselves to one target. What do I need to do next? I asked. Document everything that happens from this point forward. Any contact with them, any attempts to intimidate or manipulate you, anything they say that could be relevant to the case. And decide how far you're willing to take this. Are you prepared for criminal charges if it comes to that? I thought about Harper's casual comment that I probably won't even miss the money they stole. I thought about Cathy's skillful lies to Dad, and her cruel attack on my mother's memory when confronted with evidence. I thought about the months of smaller thefts they'd covered up with false explanations. Yes, I said, I'm prepared to take this all the way. That evening I returned home to pack a bag. Dad was waiting for me in the kitchen, and the conversation that followed changed everything. I talked to Wilson Wilde today, he said. Amelia gave me his number. What did he say? He said I should prepare for the possibility that everything I thought I knew about Cathy was wrong. Dad's voice was heavy but determined. And he's right. I've been going through our financial records, and there are charges, unexplained expenses, patterns that I ignored because I trusted her. Dad showed me printouts from their joint account. Over the past year, there had been dozens of charges that didn't make sense when examined together. Expensive restaurants when they'd supposedly eaten at home. Shopping sprees that Cathy had explained as finding great sales. ATM withdrawals that were larger and more frequent than their budget should have allowed. She's been stealing from our joint account too, Dad said. Not as obviously as what she did to you, but consistently over months. I just never added it up because I trusted her to handle most of our day-to-day finances. The scope of Cathy's deception was staggering. She hadn't just targeted me, she'd been systematically stealing from our entire family, while maintaining the facade of a loving wife and mother. I filed for divorce today, Dad said quietly. And I'm pressing charges. Wilson thinks we can get everything back, maybe more if there are civil penalties. I hugged my father, feeling the weight of his decision, and the courage it must have taken to make it. I'm sorry, Dad, I know this isn't what you wanted. No, he said, but it's what needs to happen. And Olivia, I'm proud of you for standing up to them. For gathering evidence instead of just getting angry. For being smarter than they thought you were. That night as I packed my belongings into suitcases, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. The tense uncertainty of the past few days was giving way to a clear plan of action. Legal proceedings would be difficult, but they would also be final. I was moving out of the house where I'd been betrayed, but I was moving toward a future where I controlled my own destiny. And Cathy and Harper were about to learn that stealing from the wrong person can cost far more than they ever imagined. The war was just beginning, but for the first time since this started, I felt like I was going to win. 3 days after moving into the extended stay hotel across town, I received the call I'd been waiting for. Wilson Wilde's voice was calm, but carried an undertone of satisfaction that immediately caught my attention. Olivia, we need to meet today. Cathy's attorney contacted me this morning with a settlement offer, but there's something else you need to know first. The criminal investigation has uncovered additional victims. I was sitting in my small hotel room, surrounded by case files and legal documents that had become my new reality. Additional victims. 3 of them so far. The police detective handling your case, Detective Orion Wilde, no relation, ran Cathy and Harper's names through their fraud database. It turns out your stepmother has quite a history that she's been very careful to hide. Wilson explained that the detective had found complaints dating back 5 years, all following similar patterns. Cathy would insinuate herself into families, usually as a girlfriend or roommate, gain access to financial information, then systematically steal money using various cover stories. The complaints had been filed in different counties, making it difficult to see the pattern until now. The previous victims didn't have the kind of evidence you gathered, Wilson continued. No social media documentation, no witnesses, just accusations that Cathy was able to deflect or deny. But your case has given them the credibility they needed. One of them, a woman named Natalie Hughes, from Portland, is driving down to testify. I felt a chill run through me. Testify? I thought this was going to be settled out of court. Cathy's attorney is trying to settle, yes. But the criminal charges are proceeding regardless. The district attorney wants to make an example of this case, because of the social media evidence. They're calling it fraud in the digital age, showing how criminals are actually documenting their own crimes online. We agreed to meet that afternoon at Wilson's office. When I arrived, I found not just Wilson but Detective Wilde and a woman in her early 40s who introduced herself as Natalie Hughes. Her story was eerily similar to mine, except she'd been Cathy's roommate rather than stepdaughter. She moved in claiming to be between jobs, Natalie explained, her voice tight with old anger. Said she just needed a few months to get back on her feet. Over 6 months, she stole nearly $12,000 from me. Always had explanations, borrowed my card for groceries and forgot to tell me about the extra charges, took cash from my purse for emergencies she'd pay back later. What happened when you confronted her? I asked. Same thing that happened to you initially. She turned it around, made me sound paranoid and vindictive. Said I was being petty over small amounts of money between friends. She was so convincing that I actually started doubting my own records. Detective Wilde spread out a map on Wilson's conference table, showing the pattern of Cathy's movements over the past decade. Oregon, Washington, Northern California, always staying in each area just long enough to establish trust and steal significant amounts, then moving on before victims could build cases against her. What's different about this situation, the detective explained, is that she got comfortable. She married your father, settled down, started seeing your family as a long-term resource rather than a quick score. That's when criminals make mistakes. And Harper, I asked, what's her role in all this? Harper appears to be both victim and accomplice, Wilson said carefully. Natalie, did Cathy have any other family members with her when you knew her? Natalie shook her head. She claimed to be divorced with no kids. I never saw Harper until I looked at the social media evidence you gathered. The implications were staggering. Harper might not even be Cathy's biological daughter. She could be another victim who'd been groomed and manipulated into participating in the scams, or she could be a willing partner in crime. Either way, the pattern showed that Cathy was far more dangerous than any of us had initially realized. There's something else, Detective Wilde said. We executed a search warrant on your family home yesterday while Cathy and Harper were out. What we found suggests this operation was much more sophisticated than simple impulse theft. He pulled out photos taken during the search. Cathy's bedroom contained a file cabinet full of documents, fake IDs, forged references, multiple credit cards and different names. But it was Harper's room that shocked me most. She had a notebook, the detective explained, showing me photos of handwritten pages, detailed profiles of potential targets, including financial information, daily routines, and psychological assessments. Your page was 23 entries long. The notebook page with my name at the top contained information that made my stomach turn. My work schedule, my banking habits, my emotional triggers, even notes about my relationship with my biological mother and how that could be used to manipulate me. At the bottom of the page, in Harper's distinctive handwriting, easy target, trusts family completely. Daddy issues make her desperate for approval. High income, low expenses, perfect mark. She was studying me, I said, my voice barely a whisper. For months, maybe years. The earliest entry about you is dated 14 months ago, Wilson confirmed. Right around the time Harper started college and would have needed more money. Natalie reached over and squeezed my hand. They're sociopaths, Olivia. This isn't about family or financial stress. This is about people who see other human beings as resources to be exploited. The meeting continued for another hour, going over legal strategies and coordinating testimonies. But I found myself thinking about Dad, wondering how he was processing the revelation that his wife of 8 years was a career criminal who'd targeted our family from the beginning. As if reading my thoughts, Wilson addressed the question I hadn't asked. Your father is taking this harder than you might expect. Not just the betrayal, but the realization that he brought this danger into your life. He blames himself for not protecting you. He couldn't have known, I said, none of us could have known. That's what we keep telling him. But he's asked to be present for the confrontation. What confrontation? Wilson and Detective Wilde exchanged glances. We're offering Cathy one final chance to settle this without going to trial. Full restitution to all victims, guilty plea to felony fraud charges, and cooperation in locating any other victims we haven't found yet. If she refuses, this goes to court with maximum charges. And if she accepts, reduced sentence, but still prison time. The DA won't let her walk away from this, not with the pattern of behavior we've documented. The meeting was scheduled for the next day at the courthouse. Cathy would be presented with the evidence, introduced to the other victims, and given her choice, cooperate or face the full weight of the legal system. That night, I called Dad from my hotel room. His voice sounded older, wearier than I'd ever heard it. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "I keep thinking about all the times she comforted me when I was worried about money," he said. "All the times she suggested ways to save money or talked about being more careful with our budget. She was probably calculating how much she could steal without me noticing." "Dad, you couldn't have known. She's been doing this for years. She's a professional. I brought her into our home, Olivia. I gave her access to you, to our family, to everything we had. And she used that trust to hurt you." The pain in his voice was almost unbearable. "Dad, what matters now is that we're stopping her. Not just for us, but for all her future victims. I'll be there tomorrow," he said. "For the meeting, I need to look her in the eye when she hears what we know about her." The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse wearing my best professional outfit, a navy blue suit that made me feel powerful and prepared. Wilson met me in the lobby, and together we walked through the marble halls toward the conference room where my future would be decided. "Remember," Wilson said as we approached the door, "she's going to try to manipulate everyone in that room. She'll cry, she'll blame others, she'll try to make herself the victim. Don't let her performance affect your resolve." I nodded, my hand steady on the door handle. Inside that room were the answers I'd been seeking and the justice I've been fighting for. But more than that, inside that room was the moment where I would finally take back control of my life from people who'd seen me as nothing more than a target. The door opened, and I stepped inside to face my future. Cathy was already seated at the far end of the conference table, flanked by her attorney and a court stenographer. She looked smaller than I remembered, older, her usual confident demeanor replaced by something that might have been fear. When she saw me walk in, followed by Dad, Natalie, Detective Wilde, and Wilson, her face went completely white. "Hello, Cathy," I said, taking the seat directly across from her. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation." The silence in the conference room was thick with tension as Detective Wilde opened the first evidence folder. Cathy's attorney, a thin man in an expensive suit, had clearly not been prepared for the scope of what was about to be presented. "Mrs. Thorne," Detective Wilde began, his voice professional and steady, "you're being presented with evidence of systematic fraud spanning multiple states and 5 years. We're offering you one opportunity to cooperate fully in exchange for reduced charges." Wilson stood and began laying out the evidence methodically. "First, the financial records from my case. Every transaction, every Instagram post, every lie documented with timestamps." Cathy's face grew paler with each piece of evidence. "This is just the beginning," Wilson continued, moving to Natalie's case. "Mrs. Hughes, would you like to tell Mrs. Thorne how you met her?" Natalie's voice was steady and clear as she recounted her story. I watched Cathy's expression shift from denial to panic as she realized the full scope of what had been uncovered. When Natalie finished, Detective Wilde presented the search warrant findings. "These documents were found in your bedroom, Mrs. Thorne," he said, spreading out photos of the fake IDs and forged references. "And this was found in Harper's room." He placed Harper's notebook on the table, open to the page with my profile. Cathy's attorney leaned forward to read it, and I saw his expression change from professional skepticism to genuine shock. 23 entries about your stepdaughter," the detective continued. "Detailed analysis of her financial habits, work schedule, and psychological vulnerabilities. Would you like to explain this?" For the first time since I'd entered the room, Cathy spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Where is Harper?" "Harper is in juvenile custody," Detective Wilde replied. "She's been charged as a minor, but given the sophistication of this operation, there's a possibility she'll be tried as an adult." This broke something in Cathy. She started crying, not the manipulative tears I'd seen her use before, but raw, desperate sobs. "She's not even 18 yet. This is my fault, not hers. I taught her this." Her attorney quickly placed a hand on her arm, trying to stop her from saying more, but Cathy continued. "I never meant for it to go this far. When I married David, I thought I could stop. I thought I could be normal, be a real mother to the girls. But you didn't stop," Dad said, speaking for the first time. His voice was quiet but filled with pain. "You targeted my daughter. You used my love for you to hurt the person I care about most." Cathy looked at Dad with what appeared to be genuine anguish. "David, I tried to stop. But Harper was starting college, and money was tight, and Olivia had so much. I had money because I worked for it," I interrupted. "Because I saved it, because I trusted my family not to steal from me." Wilson placed another folder on the table. "Mrs. Thorne, we've identified 2 additional victims in California and 1 in Oregon. The total amount of documented theft is over $47,000. The district attorney is prepared to file charges in multiple jurisdictions. Cathy's attorney whispered urgently in her ear for several minutes. When they finished their consultation, he addressed the room. My client is prepared to enter a guilty plea to the charges in exchange for cooperation in the investigation and full restitution to all victims. What kind of cooperation? Detective Wilde asked. Complete financial disclosure, assistance in locating any other victims, and testimony about how these schemes were organized and executed. Wilson looked at me, Natalie and Dad. This was the moment where we could choose justice or revenge. Full prosecution might mean years in court and no guarantee of getting our money back. The plea deal meant Cathy would face consequences, but we'd be made whole financially. I want to hear it from her, I said, looking directly at Cathy. I want her to admit what she did, to our faces, without lies or excuses. Cathy raised her head, tears still streaming down her face. Olivia, I stole from you. I lied to you about Harper being sick. I took your debit card under false pretenses, and I spent over $8,000 of your money on luxury items for Harper and her friends. She turned to Dad. David, I married you because I loved you, but I also saw an opportunity. I thought your family would be the perfect long-term situation for me and Harper. I'm sorry. To Natalie, she said, I stole from you just like I stole from Olivia. You trusted me as a friend, and I betrayed that trust for money. The admissions continued for 20 minutes. Every lie, every manipulation, every theft laid bare in clinical detail. By the end, even her attorney looked disgusted. Detective Wilde closed his notebook. Mrs. Thorne, you're under arrest for multiple counts of fraud, theft and identity theft. You'll be processed and held pending sentencing. As the bailiff led Cathy away in handcuffs, she turned back one last time. Olivia, I know you'll never forgive me, but I need you to know, I did love you like a daughter. That part wasn't fake. I looked at this woman who had been my stepmother for 8 years, who had attended my graduations and birthday parties, who had helped me through heartbreaks and celebrated my achievements. If you had loved me, I said quietly, you never would have hurt me. Wilson handed me a document as we left the courthouse. The restitution order. You'll have your money back within 30 days, plus interest and legal fees. Cathy's assets are being seized and liquidated. Outside in the afternoon sun, Dad and I stood together on the courthouse steps. The weight I'd been carrying for weeks was finally lifting. It's over, Dad said, more to himself than to me. No, I replied, feeling something new and powerful settling in my chest. It's just beginning. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely free to build my own future, on my own terms, with people I chose to trust. The money would be returned, the criminals would face justice, and I had learned exactly how strong I could be when everything was on the line. Justice had been served, but more importantly, I had served it myself. 6 months later, I stood in the living room of my new apartment in downtown Willowbrook, watching the morning sun stream through floor-to-ceiling windows that I had chosen myself. The space was modern, clean and entirely mine, from the security system I'd personally installed to the bank accounts that only I had access to. Every decision, from the granite countertops to the deadbolt locks, had been made by me, for me. The apartment was everything I'd dreamed of during those long nights in the extended stay hotel, but it represented something far more valuable than just independence. It was proof that I could rebuild not just my finances, but my entire life, stronger than it had been before. The restitution money had been returned in full, just as Wilson had promised. Cathy's assets, including jewelry, designer clothes, and even a small investment account I'd never known about, had been liquidated to pay back all her victims. The total amount I received was actually more than what had been stolen, thanks to interest, penalties, and legal fees that the court had ordered her to pay. But the money was just the beginning of my recovery. I'd been promoted at Morrison & Associates 3 months earlier, after Jennifer Walsh recommended me for a senior accountant position that came with a significant salary increase. My meticulous documentation of the fraud case had impressed the partners, who saw it as evidence of exactly the kind of analytical thinking and attention to detail they valued in their employees. You turned a personal crisis into a masterclass in financial investigation, Jennifer had told me during my promotion review. That's the kind of problem-solving skill we want to invest in. Cathy had been sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to 6 confirmed victims across 3 states. The judge had been particularly harsh about the family betrayal aspect, calling it an unconscionable breach of trust that strikes at the heart of what family relationships should represent. Harper's case had been more complicated. As Wilson predicted, she'd been tried as an adult due to the sophistication of her role in the schemes. But her cooperation with investigators, including testimony about how Cathy had groomed her into the lifestyle from age 14, had earned her a reduced sentence, 2 years in a juvenile facility followed by 5 years of supervised probation. During the sentencing hearing, Harper had read a letter apologizing to all the victims. Her words seemed genuine, describing how Cathy had gradually normalized the theft by starting with small amounts and building up to elaborate schemes. She'd claimed that by the time she understood what they were doing was seriously wrong, she was already in too deep and too afraid of Cathy to stop. I'd chosen not to respond to her apology. Whether Harper was truly remorseful or simply saying what her lawyer had coached her to say, didn't matter to me anymore. What mattered was that she faced consequences, and that future potential victims were protected. Dad had moved out of our old house within a month of Cathy's arrest. He'd bought a smaller place across town, a 2-bedroom condo that he'd specifically chosen with a guest room for me to visit. Our relationship had deepened through the crisis, built on a foundation of shared trauma, but also mutual respect for how we'd each handled the situation. "I'm proud of how you fought back," he told me during one of our weekly dinners. "But I'm even more proud of how you fought smart. You could have just screamed and cried, and demanded justice. Instead, you built a case that was impossible to deny." We'd both been in therapy, separately and occasionally together, working through the complex emotions of having been so thoroughly deceived by someone we'd loved. Dad struggled particularly with guilt over bringing Cathy into our lives, but his therapist was helping him understand that skilled manipulators specifically target good, trusting people. "The fact that you trusted her doesn't make you weak," I'd reminded him during one of our sessions. "It makes you the kind of person worth knowing. She's the one who chose to abuse that trust." My own therapy had focused on rebuilding my ability to trust my instincts and set appropriate boundaries. Dr. Cassie Finch, a trauma specialist who worked with financial abuse victims, had helped me understand that what I'd experienced was more than just theft. It was psychological manipulation designed to undermine my sense of reality. Gaslighting victims often struggle with trusting their own perceptions afterward, Dr. Finch had explained. "The fact that you documented everything, that you trusted your evidence over their lies, shows remarkable psychological resilience." The most profound change, though, wasn't in my living situation or bank account, it was in how I moved through the world. I was more careful now, but not paranoid. More independent, but not isolated. I'd learned to trust my instincts while also protecting myself with verification and boundaries. I'd started dating again, but with a completely different approach than before. Instead of assuming the best about people until proven wrong, I now let trust build gradually through consistent actions over time. It was a slower process, but it felt infinitely safer. The man I'd been seeing for the past 2 months, Tristan Beckett, was a software engineer I'd met through a hiking group. What I appreciated most about him was his patience with my careful approach to relationships and his genuine interest in my story without trying to fix or save me. "You handled something impossible with incredible grace," he'd said, after I'd told him about the fraud case. "That's not trauma, that's triumph." On this particular morning, as I prepared coffee in my kitchen, while reviewing weekend plans, my phone buzzed with a text from Wilson Wild. It was a photo of a news article from a Portland newspaper financial fraud victim advocacy group, formed by local women. The article was about Natalie Hughes, who had used her experience with Cathy's crimes to start a support organization for people who'd been financially abused by family members or intimate partners. The group provided legal resources, emotional support, and practical advice for rebuilding after financial betrayal. "Thought you'd want to see this," Wilson's message read. "She mentioned you as inspiration for starting the group." I smiled, feeling a warm sense of connection to this woman I'd only met briefly, but who'd helped validate my experience. We'd exchanged contact information after the trial, and her periodic updates on her own recovery had been encouraging to follow. Later that afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Detective Wild. His voice carried good news. "Olivia, I wanted to let you know that your case has helped us identify 3 more victims from Cathy's earlier activities, 2 in California, and 1 in Nevada. They're all getting restitution through asset recovery. How did you find them?" "Your social media evidence was the key. We worked backward through Cathy's online footprint, and found similar patterns in other cities. The Nevada victim actually had screenshots of Cathy's daughter, apparently a different girl than Harper, posting about spending emergency money on luxury items. The revelation that there had been other young women in Harper's position was both shocking and heartbreaking. How many victims had Cathy created over the years? How many people had she groomed into her criminal lifestyle? But it also reinforced something I'd come to understand, my decision to fight back, to document everything, to demand justice. It had ripple effects far beyond my own situation. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered, every screenshot I'd taken, every legal precedent Wilson had established in my case was now protecting other people. As evening approached, I stood on my apartment balcony, looking out over the city lights of Willowbrook. In the distance, I could see the building where Morrison and Associates was located, where my career was flourishing. Closer, the coffee shop, where I'd spent those early days planning my strategy and building my case. My phone rang, interrupting my reflection. Dad's name appeared on the screen. "Hey Dad, what's up? Just wanted to hear your voice," he said. "And to tell you something I've been thinking about all day." "What's that?" "Your mother, your real mother would be so proud of who you've become. Not just how you handled this situation, but the woman you are. Strong, intelligent, principled. She would be amazed by your strength." I felt tears prick at my eyes, but they were good tears. "Thanks, Dad. That means everything to me." After we hung up, I remained on the balcony for a while longer, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 10 months ago, I'd been a trusting young woman who handed over her debit card without question to someone who claimed to love her. Tonight I was someone who understood that real love never asks you to sacrifice your security, your dignity, or your sense of reality. The experience had taught me that family isn't just about blood or legal documents, it's about mutual respect, genuine care, and consistent actions that demonstrate love rather than just claim it. Dad had proven himself to be real family by standing with me when the truth was difficult. Cathy and Harper had proven themselves to be strangers wearing family masks. Most importantly, I'd learned that I didn't need anyone's permission to protect myself, demand respect, or fight for what was rightfully mine. I'd always been strong enough to handle whatever life threw at me, I just hadn't been tested in a way that proved it to myself. Now I knew exactly who I was, and what I was capable of. And that knowledge was worth more than any amount of money they could have stolen. The apartment around me wasn't just a home, it was a fortress I'd built with my own hands, my own intelligence, and my own determination. Every lock, every security measure, every carefully chosen boundary was a reminder that I controlled my own life now. And no one would ever take that power away from me again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.